It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's the Glute guys.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Glute Guys Network. We have an interesting thing going on today. So, you may know we are the Glute Guys. That means if there's a video about glutes online, we have to react to it.
Experts in all things glutes.
Yes, and popular, famous YouTuber Jeff Nippard just came out with a new video about glutes. So, he's a very scientific-based bodybuilder. He goes into all the research. He's a very smart guy. I don't know if he's ever been. I mean, I think he's been in bodybuilding competitions. Honestly, I don't know how he did. I think he did pretty well. I forget off the top of my head. Do you know, Dr. Tom?
I'm not too familiar off the top of my head with bodybuilding so much. So no, unfortunately, I don't have the answer for that one either.
All right. Well, he gives a lot of good tips. Gives a lot of good advice. And in this video, he's making a tier list. So we decided we'd react. We'd say whether we agree, whether we disagree, and then we go from there. Sounds good, Dr. Tom?
Sounds like it's good to me.
All right, let's get started with this video.
The glutes are one of the single most important muscles for building an impressive
I'll turn it up a little bit for you
They're also
people.
one of the largest muscles in the body, so regardless of whether you're a man or you're a woman, building this one muscle will make it immediately obvious that you lift from the side and the rear. So, in this video, I'm ranking the best and worst glute exercises for muscle growth using the latest exercise science. We'll go from S tier.
I think we should pause real quick. Dr. Tom, how do you think you would describe a good or bad exercise for the glutes? Because in this video, he goes like a very bodybuilding focused like description of things. For you, like as a physical therapist or just in general, what do you think is a good exercise for glutes?
That's actually a good question. So yeah, I was gonna say it's really dependent on what you're looking for out of the muscle. So initially, for a physical therapy standpoint, since that's the question you're asking, I would say that you want to do more, like functional based activities. You want to look for an exercise that's going to be like challenging for the glute, but not like what's the like over exhausting. Like there's the glute's primary job is to help propel you when you're walking and running, rising from sitting position. So you want to do something that's kind of on a functional standpoint. So that's why I've always been a fan of squats. I have a lot of patients do a lot of different variations on squats. And it's really like as large of a muscle as it is, it's a powerful muscle. It also is an endurance muscle. So you want to do something that, to me involves more like repetition in a sense, because you want to train that muscle to be longer lasting, endurance based.
And so I will clarify, we are talking about glute max, glute med, and glute min.
Yeah. So I mean, if we want to go diving into specifics, obviously glute med and min are helping with the abduction, a little bit of the extension, and glute max primary is extension. So it's all about hip stabilization again during those functional activities. Unilateral exercises, one-sided, is also very big for the glute muscles as well.
Yeah, so to me too, like I guess an S tier exercise for me is something that helps a lot with stability, helps with balance. Even for an athlete, can make you more stable with a more dynamic movement, or keep you stable for long distances. Like a marathon runner needs to have really strong glutes so they don't get something like a IT band syndrome or patellofemoral pain stuff. Even though that's sort of a garbage term, that's another topic for another day. So just generally stability, balance, function.
Yeah. And I mean, right off the bat with Jeff here, since we're talking gym, I'm gonna expect him to kind of throw some of that to the side. We're talking most likely with Jeff right now, since this is gonna be the first time I'm even watching the video in full. I'm expecting hypertrophy type exercises. He's talking about building size, so I'm expecting some strength and hypertrophy type exercises. Where in a physical therapy standpoint, I'd probably put those in like a B and C tier because I mean they're not quite as important to me for like my patients, but they serve a purpose in muscle growth and they're important. If you don't got glute muscles, we got to build them. So they're not bad exercises, but they're not as important to
This man likes to build big girth on all of his muscles.
Big juicy booties is what we're aiming for, apparently.
Yep. I will say I did watch most of the video, and he does talk a little bit about the functionality of some exercises too. So I'll give it to him.
Okay.
let's continue. Let's see what Jeff has to say.
for super, all the way down to F tier for fail. And at the end, I'll show you what I think are the very best and the very worst glute exercises of all time. Now, in order to figure out which exercises are better, we need to understand some very basic glute anatomy first. The gluteals are technically 3 distinct muscles. There's
Listen
the
to
very
Jeff.
large
He's
gluteus
talking about
maximus,
butts.
which is the real powerhouse of your lower body. It extends your hips like in a deadlift, and externally rotates your leg, like when you point your toes out. There's the gluteus medius, which is about 1/3 of the size
We need to
of
find
the
out how
gluteus
to do this
maximus,
muscle
but
thing.
it's still well worth focusing on. It's still quite big. It has about the same amount of muscle mass as your delts, and since it sits on the upper glutes, it'll enhance that appearance of an upper glute shelf. The glute medius is very active during hip abduction, where you sweep your leg out to the side, and it's a very important stabilizer. So it's especially active during single leg exercises. And there's the even smaller glute minimus, which is about half the size of the glute medius, but also plays a key stabilization role and can add size to the upper glutes. In addition to being split into those 3 separate muscles, your glute
Hold on a second. Do you think that these images are anatomically correct?
No.
Yeah, the glute max I think is right. The glute
I think-
med and glute min I think are a little off.
Yeah, because unless if you turn it to the side medius, but to me they're a little bit off. But I see what he's trying to go for. It's just trying to show the general location of the glute muscles.
Yeah, isn't it worth
to
it
me-
for us to even look up a glute medius photo?
Yeah, I'll throw one up there. But to me, that's a pretty large glute min also.
Yeah, like the glute min is usually pretty small. But that's being very nitpicky. Overall is definitely a good description of these things. That's just, never mind. I'll keep going.
glutes can also be divided into an upper, middle, and lower portion. And as we go, I'll reveal my number 1 exercise for each division of the glutes hidden behind these 3 doors. So keep in mind that just because an exercise gets into S tier doesn't necessarily mean it's S tier for the entire glutes. It might be S tier for targeting one specific area. And here's my criteria for ranking glute exercises. To get into S tier, the exercise needs to provide high tension, especially in the stretched position. It should feel good, which means it doesn't cause knee, hip, or low back pain, and there should be some way of progressing the exercise over time, which is ultimately what'll keep your glutes growing. Okay, let's start with the most popular glute exercise on the internet, the hip thrust. The barbell hip thrust is, oddly enough, one of the more studied movements in all of exercise science. There's a pile of studies showing that it is, in fact, very effective at growing the glutes. The hip thrust will activate the entire glute, the upper, middle, and lower, but mainly target that middle meat because it isolates hip extension. It's a great movement for progressive overload. You can almost always add a little weight each week while keeping your form tight. I don't think you need a 500-pound hip thrust to grow your glutes, but if your glutes are getting stronger on this movement, somewhere in the 5 to 15 rep range, then your glutes are also getting bigger. There is a slight issue though. A lot of people find that the barbell pinches their hips. You can alleviate this to some degree by using a big cushy pad, or even rolling up some yoga mats, or by strategically placing the bar in that cushy crease of your hip below the anterior superior iliac spine and above the pubic bone. But even if you avoid that painful pinching, it can still feel awkward. It also takes time to set up, especially if you don't have a hip thruster platform or if you're loading a lot of plates. The hip thrust also doesn't get the glutes into a super deep stretch. Even a deep range of motion hip thrust only gets the glutes into about 90 degrees of hip flexion compared to the 130 degrees of range that's possible for most lifters. But this isn't as much of a deal breaker as you might think. I don't know that the glutes need a ultra deep stretch to grow. A recent 9-week study with untrained subjects found that the hip thrust was just as effective as the squat at growing the glutes, despite the fact that the squat does stretch the glutes more. Now, that's just one study, and other research does suggest that the glutes respond well to deeper training. So, like other muscles, I suspect the glutes will grow best from a combination of exercises that challenge them in a more stretched position, like the squat, plus exercises that challenge them in a more shortened position, like the hip thrust. As an overall glute max builder, I'm putting the barbell hip thrust into high B tier. Now, if you have access to a good hip thrust,
What do we think, sir?
I mean, I see what he means by it with the stretch, but I was even going to say it seems we've got a lot of emphasis on this overstretch forward, which understandably, yes, we need stretch in order to allow the muscle for further contraction, but there's also a point where stretch starts to become too much that the muscle can't optimally contract anyway. You've got a certain point where the fibers, the myosin and the actin, when they're to reach over each other, you can only contract so far. If we're overstretched, now they can't contract. If they're understretched, now we also can't contract. So you want them at an optimal point. So him focusing on the stretch is the only thing I'm worried about. If we're overstretching way too far, we're not going to get any muscle building. If we're understretching, we're not going to get any muscle building. It's got to be somewhere in the middle. So I also think that the study that he pulled up real quick about the squat, I mean, the motion is pretty much the same. You're not getting any further hip extension. It's not like you're basically for a squat and for this hip thrust, you're taking the hip right into a neutral position.
I think you were saying hip flexion though. You get more
flexion
with the squat.
Yes, yeah, he was talking about a deeper stretch with the hip flexion, but now I'm talking about the extension part when you go and you actually do the motion. Like at the end range of a squat, when you're up top and you're squeezing the glutes, standing, you don't go anywhere past the hip extension at neutral, is what I'm saying.
So I think the big thing that has been in a lot of bodybuilding research recently was that like the stretch position is good for optimizing muscle growth. I don't know if I have the articles off the top of my head, but I have heard from a few like YouTubers and a few other buddies that are really big into bodybuilding that there's a lot of research that came out about the stretch position and doing exercises there. That being said, I mean, we see bodybuilders all the time that haven't ever worked on that like stretched out, like maximally stretched position that have gotten very big muscles and have done very well. And a lot of it too has to be about just challenging your muscles adequately. Like if you're not doing enough weight or you're not doing the exercise properly, you're probably not going to build as much muscle as like just being in the stretch position over time. Like if you're just in the stretch or get into the stretch position and you're not challenging yourself, you're not going to build any muscle.
Yeah, I mean, there's an optimal position for the stretch position. You know, like there's a point in which like if you were to stretch any further, it's actually going to be just as under effective as if you were shortened just too much. You know, like there's an actual optimal point in which the muscle fibers are supposed to contract. If you look at like a muscle fiber and you talk about the myosin and actin in it, at a certain point they get overstretched and they can't contract. So
yeah,
you want to be careful with how far you stretch the muscle before you can't really fire it.
It's like if you have just your elbow and someone tries to pull it out, or I'm having a brain fart.
Extend you're talking about?
If you're like looking at how much force production you have when, hold on, let me try to get into this. When your muscle is here versus here and like perfectly straight, you're gonna have the most force production here, and you're gonna have the least either here or straight elbow. So that's what Dr. Tom, I think, is saying, that maximally shortened, maximally lengthened is the weakest position of a muscle. So is it the best to train your muscle in the weakest position that it's in? That could definitely be debatable, to say the least.
Exactly. You want to have some stretch to it, but you don't want to overstretch it. So that part I see what he's meaning by it, but I think that the hip thrust is still, like he's putting it at a B. I probably would have put it at an A.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the glute bridge. I feel like it hits the muscles that you're going for. It's a challenging exercise. It's easy to progress, easy to set up too, even for a beginner. Maybe a little uncomfortable, but I think it's a good one. Shall we keep going?
It's a different form of stability on the hips and everything too. So, but yeah, let's see what else he's got.
All right, let's keep going.
Thrust machine, like this Nautilus glute drive, I think you can solve a few of those issues. The belt is much more comfy than a barbell. You also don't need to set anything up, and because the machine is very stable, you won't need to use any balance and should be able to focus on engaging your glutes better. I personally do these every...
I'm going to pause real quick. So one of the positives he said is that you don't have to use any balance. And that's actually something that I don't like as much. Like I actually like it when an exercise makes you work on your balance a little bit. Like we were saying before, the glutes activate a lot with balance exercises. So having an exercise that has balance involved actually helps activate the glutes more and get them more functional. But that's not necessarily what a bodybuilder is looking for either. They're not looking for functional. They're looking for just huge muscles as big as you possibly can. So good for bodybuilders, maybe not good if you're trying to become more functional in a sport where a lot of stability is necessary.
Yes, it's all sport dependent. For him and in his sport, for weightlifting and bodybuilding, it's all hypertrophy. So this is perfect for him.
All right, here we go.
every single week, and I think they belong in high A tier, and I'm actually gonna pick them as my #1 option for the middle aspect of the glutes. Their only downside, as I see it, is the lack of a really deep stretch, but we'll pick that up with some other exercises. Another really good option is the single leg dumbbell hip thrust. These will hit the entire glutes, but unlike the other options, may shift some emphasis to the upper glutes because the glute medius and minimus will need to stabilize for balance. You can also prevent left to right muscle imbalances by focusing on each glute individually. And I don't like to go heavy here. Just stick to 12 to 15 reps and really focus on controlling the movement. They're going in A tier as well. The glute bridge is really just a hip thrust, but with less range of motion. They're a bit easier to set up because you don't need a bench, and they're great for beginners because they require less stabilization. Some people also say they can isolate their glutes more.
I'm going to pause again. I feel like he sort of contradicted himself there because the first bridge that he talked about, he said he didn't like using it with the bar because it's not as good for stability. And then he went on to the single leg one and said he liked that more because it has more to do with stability. Which it does, without a doubt. If you're on 1 foot, more stability, you're gonna really get a big workout for the glutes. But he just said that he wanted to switch to the belt one because it adds more stability and less room for error. But you're just sort of discounting the stability aspect of the first one with the barbell.
Yeah, and also, I mean, listen, everybody's got a different way to exercise, and form is, based on the person. I wasn't the biggest fan of the form of that glute bridge. It almost looked like he was heavily reliant on stabilizing himself with his upper body, which to me is going to take away from your glutes a little bit, and you're kind of taking the stability aspect out of it. I would opt more for, and again, he might bring it up a little later, like a single leg RDL with a dumbbell instead. I feel because you're going to still get that glute med aspect that you're looking for. And you're going to get a little bit more of that, unstable balance type function, and you can still do 12 to 15 reps. And in my opinion, I'll feel that more than the single leg bridges. I've done single leg bridges before. I don't feel them so much. The single leg RDL, I feel a lot more in the glute than I do for something like that.
He talks about the RDL.
Yeah, I had a feeling. Well, it's single leg RDL, but I had a feeling he was going to bring it up.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch it at work earlier, so this is a raw reaction. As we go.
More with
All right, here we go.
by taking some of the quads out, but I still prefer the hip thrust because it has more range of motion. Low B tier. Frog pumps are also kind of like a hip thrust, except you externally rotate your hips and clamp your feet together. This will shift some emphasis to the upper glutes since abducting your hips will engage the glute medius more. I actually don't hate these as a high rep finisher, but they're hard to load, which forces you to use really high reps, and they don't stretch the glutes very well. I'm putting them in high C tier. All right, so let's take a look at some exercises that actually do stretch.
Any comments on the frog bridge?
I'm not a fan. I see an issue, like the way that he's stabilizing himself with the feet together. My ankles are screaming. Over time, if you try to load and progress those ones, I just see a lot of issues with that one. He said it's activating more glute min, is what he said?
No, he said med.
He said med?
Yeah.
All right, no,
Did he say
I
med?
misheard and I thought I heard min.
Let's check.
Upper glutes, since abducting your hips will engage the glute medius more. Actually,
Yeah.
I don't hate
Okay,
these
said
as a
med.
So,
The highlighting of the green made me think min for a second, is what he was saying. But okay.
but that's like going to what we said before. I don't know if those are anatomically accurate to the glute med. At least
Yeah,
based on ones that I've seen in like anatomy textbooks and stuff like that. Then again, there's a lot of stuff or pictures you see in other areas that see different things. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I actually do like that exercise personally because I just feel a lot of glute med activation, but it's also like a very progressed exercise too. Like I wouldn't give it to most people. Like I would want people to progress a lot before they try that.
Yeah, if I'm stepping out my physical therapy brain, a great exercise for the actual glute med. I just don't like it for if I were to give it to a patient, it'd have to be progressed. I have to make sure that their ankles aren't going to be something that I have to worry about. But no, overall, I mean, not a bad exercise. He put it at a C.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, so I would say like C. It's they just worry about possible injury if you're not doing that one correctly. So, like you said, progressed exercise.
Here we
high
go.
rep finisher, but they're hard to load, which forces you to use really high reps, and they don't stretch the glutes very well. I'm putting them in high C tier. All right, so let's take a look at some exercises that actually do stretch the glutes quite a lot. we'll start with squats. I think squats are a super underrated glute builder on social media. Like the hip thrust, you're extending your hips, so you'll activate all regions of the glutes, but especially that middle chunk. I would say most of my own glute development does come from squats and my background in powerlifting. The only potential downside of squats is that they don't really isolate the glutes well. You get a huge quad stimulus too. So if you're only trying to grow your glutes without growing your quads, squats aren't your best option. That said, you can make the movement more glute dominant by placing the bar a few inches lower on your back, leaning further forward, and focusing on really driving through your hips. Also, research shows that squatting deeper is important for glute growth, so try to at least break parallel. Despite some limitations, I'm still putting the barbell squat in A tier for glute growth. With the Smith machine squat, you can place your feet further forward to make it more glute dominant, and you never need to worry about losing your balance. It's also going in A tier. The Bulgarian split squat gets a deeper stretch on the glutes than the standard barbell squat, and because they're single leg, in addition to the middle glutes, you'll get the upper glutes more involved. To make them even more glute focused, place your front foot further forward and lean forward as you squat. Again, think about driving through your hips rather than just standing up with your knees. This will help you engage your...
I'm going to pause real quick just because I feel like we went through 3 quick ones.
Yeah.
So back squat, Smith McQueen squat, and then I'm blanking. What's the last one?
Bulgarian
Bulgarian
split.
squat.
I'm a big fan of all 3.
Yeah, I am a fan of squats, but normal body weight squats. I don't love Smith machine squats. Yeah, Smith McQueen squats. Because it just I feel like it's always made me go on like an unnatural bar path where it makes you do that sort of weird diagonal line. And to me, they've always felt uncomfortable. Like, that being said, I think they're good for beginners. They're good for people who are by themselves if they want to have like a fail safe in case they lose their balance. I think squats for me, like this normal barbell squats, I would consider S tier for the glutes. Just like we've said before, stability, functionality. You use them with everything in everyday life. I can see what he's saying, how you use the quads more, or not more, but you use them a lot as well. But to me, it's like most people, especially if you're just trying to be functional, a good athlete, it doesn't really matter if you grow your glutes and your quads at the same time. Like, you don't really need to isolate the glutes that much if you're in a lot of different sports aside from something like bodybuilding. Like, most of the time you want to strengthen everything in your legs.
No, I agree, especially because a lot of times the glutes and the quads are going to work in unison, especially in everyday functional activities, and also in sports too. I mean, you think about a runner, when they propel themselves, what are we doing? We're extending the hip and extending the knee for that propulsion at the end to send you. So the two of them are working together in unison like that. It's better to train them together in unison rather than separate. But again, it's all sport dependent. His sport wants him to grow glutes, so he's not really thinking of it in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also a fan of I would put those squats in the S tier. Even I haven't done the Smith machine squats in a hot second, but I like how he set them up, even saying you put your feet out a little bit more in front of you and you're going to get more of the glute activation, which is also true. It might actually make the Smith machine a little bit more comfortable. So I actually like that he mentioned that too, because some people get under a Smith machine and try to treat it like it's going to be a barbell and have the same issues that you described, where it's like, it's going to be feeling uncomfortable and natural. He set it up more so like a leg press in a way, by putting the feet out like that. So just a different variation. And I always love the split squats. I do split squats probably majority of the time on my leg days.
Yeah, I like split squats. I pulled a hammy once doing split squats, so I honestly don't do them that often. What I actually like more is doing a single leg squat, where you just have a chair behind you. You just use one foot, sit down, stand up. You can even just say it's a sit stand. And for me, it's like a lot of stability. It's not easy. You could always progress by just holding dumbbells. So I like that a little bit more in this. I feel like my legs just feel a little bit more safe with it. But I still think this is a very good exercise. I would not say it's bad at all.
It's more progressive. You just have to watch form. You need to, like he's talked about before, like you got to be careful with your knees. Quick myth bust: the knees over toe drama that everybody used to talk about. You don't have to worry about that. If your knees go over your toes during a squat, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to blow them out.
That's great. Let's keep going.
Your glutes a lot better. These are very close to S tier, but they are a bit harder to overload, especially if you do them with dumbbells. They also smoke your quads and are a really exhausting movement in general.
Don't smoke,
I usually
people.
do 2 sets per leg and call it there. I'm feeling high A tier. Before I get to our first S tier exercise,
Ooh,
let's knock out a
nice.
couple duds. Donkey kicks
I would've thought would hit
don't
ass.
grow your glutes very well. They're really hard to overload. Even with a band, you're still getting very little tension.
I'm not a fan of these either.
And it's hard to progressively overload using a band anyway.
No.
I think they're solid as a warm-up activation drill or to help beginners
I just
feel
see that
their
band
glutes engaged.
slipping and hurting.
Do we need to go into that one?
I mean, it's not a bad exercise. It's not like awful. Like I wouldn't put it in an F. I'd put it in like a C or a D. It's like, yeah, it gets the glutes firing. He's not wrong. It's not going to grow your glutes, but it's going to activate them. It's going to fire them. So to say that it's a bad glute exercise in general, I'd disagree with that. Because it is exercising the glutes, and if you're not as if you're someone who's like older or you want to warm the glutes up, that's fine. If you're someone who's not into weightlifting and stuff so much, and you want to do something that's easier but still going to work your glutes, fantastic exercise. It'll get it firing. But I see what he means.
Yeah. I think it's overall not a bad exercise for low-level people that haven't been working out or they're trying to rehab or something like that, which I actually think he might have said.
Mhm.
But either way, it is a good exercise for certain things, not really for growing your muscles nice and big and juicy.
As a glute hypertrophy exercise, these are going in low D tier. Fire hydrants have similar issues. They just don't get high tension on the glutes. They can work for mobility or in rehab contexts, but I'm putting them in low D tier.
I agree
as a
with
glute
Jeff.
builder. All right, let's look at some exercises that target the upper
He's not wrong.
glutes. Kickbacks are great for the upper glutes, especially if you kick up and out diagonally. That's because the upper glute fibers perform both hip extension, which is the up part, and hip abduction, which is the out and diagonally part. Kickbacks are actually very stable if you brace against the machine, and perhaps even more stable if you brace against a bench. The resistance profile
I don't know. The thing I just keep noticing is how he keeps trying to stabilize, but then he also keeps wanting to work on stability for things at the same time.
Yeah, I was never a fan of this one because look at how far forward he's leaning, grabbing. Like to me, like good form on a cable extension for the hips is damn near impossible. Like, okay, we got to lean forward, we got to grab onto the machine. Now we're contorting our body in all funky ways. What's that going to do to the muscle? It's like an okay exercise.
See,
But I'm never a fan of this one.
I would even prefer, let me see if I can get myself in here, you just to stand up like straight and do a straight kickback because you're actually going to get the same range of motion. You're just not going to be in that funky leaned over position. You know what I mean?
Like,
Hold on, let me get in position here. Let me get my tap blankie off of me. Oh, geez. So basically, this position where you're just kicking straight back, really trying to activate those glutes. I would prefer that only because you're not doing all that lean forward, funky positioning of the rest of your body. And on top of that, if you're not grabbing onto a bunch of stuff, you're also working on stability of your hip as well. So you're sort of killing two birds with one stone.
yeah, and just to add one other thing to it too, I mean, with this kind of positioning, he's a very healthy, athletic guy, bodybuilder, strong. He can load up weight and do it. If you go and load up too much weight on this, you're running the risk of just like lower back injury with something like this too, because it's like just the unnatural positioning. So you got to just. He didn't mention it yet, and maybe he does in a second. You just have to worry about the amount of weight that you throw on the cable for something like this. I've seen a lot of people in the gym who throw on way too much weight for this kind of exercise, and they're just like trying to crank it as much as they can, like swinging all the momentum into it, and then they end up in my office.
Yeah, this or like a side kick, same type of thing. People end up just putting way too much weight on and hurting themselves. Like the glute med and glute min, he didn't mention, are not super strong muscles. Like they're not something that you have to use a very heavy weight. They're more endurance muscles. Like we want them working for a long period of time and being efficient at it too.
Yeah, you can grow like those muscles, but they're not going to necessarily grow with like an insane amount of weight. You don't need a lot of weight to train them, which is why I was happy he said for like that single leg bridge. or hip thrust rather. He said he never does heavy weight with it, and he was kind of showing that the glute med doesn't need a lot to challenge it.
Mm-hmm.
Profile should feel nice and smooth. You don't get the biggest stretch, but that can be made up with other exercises that we'll get to. I don't do a whole lot of kickbacks myself, but I do think they're a really great option if you like them or if you want to isolate the glutes without hitting quads. I'm thinking low A tier. Step-ups will target the upper glutes because you're doing one leg at a time, and the stability requirement engages the glute medius and minimus.
I like step-ups
too.
too.
Deep stretch on the entire glute, especially if you set the box
That is a very
higher,
deep stretch that he's
at
putting.
just above knee level, which will force your glutes to work harder than your quads. If you have a handle to grab onto, you can keep your balance better and overload the glutes even more. They can be a bit awkward at first, but once you learn how to engage your glutes more than your quads, I think they're killer. Low A tier. Machine hip abductions are fantastic for the upper glutes. That's because they really...
I still think that it's just taking away the stability. For a functional thing, just trying to be more functional, if you're grabbing on something, you're not working on stability as much.
Well, I agree and disagree in the sense that he put that as a very high step, a very deep step. So he's just giving himself something. As long as you're not pulling yourself up with it, I'm okay with it just to kind of balance yourself to complete the exercise. If he was doing like a basic stair step up, then I'd say, yeah, there's no reason to hang on. We want to work on stability. But he's just trying to challenge the hell out of the glute max and glute med muscles.
Yeah, so it's just a difference of goals. Like his goal is to get big butts. Our goal, or my goal, or our goal is just to be more functional, be able to do things in an efficient way and without hurting yourself.
Exactly.
All right, Jeff. Oh,
challenge the glute medius and minimus directly through their primary function of hip abduction. If you lean forward by about 30 degrees, you'll improve the line of pull of those upper glute fibers, and you should feel a deeper stretch at the bottom. I usually do these for 15 to 20 reps, although heavier low rep work is also good. You can always progressively overload the movement by just increasing the pin weight, and when you eventually max out the stack, you can use a gym pin to add more. If you want a little extra range of motion, you can add an extra pad on the inside. And while it may not be the best overall glute builder, it's just so good at targeting the upper glutes. And for that reason, it's our first exercise going into S tier. And it's also my number one exercise for the upper glutes.
I wanted to see what you had to say about that.
I find that very interesting that that's his S tier exercise, his first X tier exercise. And that the fact that like squats didn't make it in there, split squats didn't make it in there. I would have put split squats in the S tier. I would have put squats in the S tier. That machine makes it into S tier. I mean, I guess, of course, it comes down to goals. I personally want to read the research article on that one. I didn't really like the idea of like loading it up that much because, as we were just describing, the glute med muscle isn't like a muscle that needs a crazy amount of weight like that. No, he's a whole different animal. He's got a boatload of muscle, so maybe his is that strong. But still, in my opinion, I disagree.
Also, there's a lot of research on glute med activation, and when you have a more flexed trunk, like when you're leaning forward and your hips are flexed, you're going to have a lot more TFL or TFL activation, which is a muscle that attaches to your IT band, which is also on the side of your leg.
And the reason why
TFL IT band, pretty much. We don't have the cool graphics that he does, but when you overactivate that can sometimes lead to knee problems. That can lead to other problems as well. So I personally don't like that. What's that?
IT band syndrome is a big one that we run into.
Yeah, so I personally don't like that exercise. I would put it probably in like C or D, honestly.
I'd put it down in D. I like it as a finisher. Like if I'm done exercising and I gotta just like finish off like the glute muscles, then I'll do that. But I don't like it as an S tier. Even for growth, like you just said, like leaning forward, you're gonna get more TFL activation. Reason being is going back to what I said a couple minutes ago is if you start to overstretch the muscle too far, especially a muscle like glute med, if we start to overstretch it to a point, to a certain point, it can't really activate anymore. You're not going to get an optimal activation. I know he's talking about stretch, but stretch only comes down to a certain point where stretch starts to actually work against you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you have to watch out for. The myosin act and like optimal point of stretch. If you go too past it, now it can't grab onto itself anymore.
Yeah.
So, but that's my soapbox.
I do think it's you will still get glute med activation with that exercise. It's just it's going to be like almost competed with the TFL, which like he said with the squat, he didn't like the squat because he thought there'd be too much quads activation. With that exercise, there's too much TFL activation. It's a similar idea. I digress. Let's continue.
Making it the reveal behind door number 1. Cable hip abductions do the same basic thing, but I find them harder to overload, they're not quite as stable, and they're a bit more annoying to set up. I'm thinking B tier. The lateral banded walk is the same basic movement pattern, but the band offers virtually zero tension in the stretch. These are fine enough as a warm-up drill or for helping people engage their medius better.
Going back to exercises that I would like to be performed a little bit better. Again, like the hip extension, yeah, he's leaning so far over to the side that he's not actually getting, I guess, as efficient activation of his glutes. And a lot of times this exercise has more to do with the leg that's on the ground than the leg that's lifting up. And you're just putting them both in such a funky position that you just have much higher likelihood to hurt yourself.
There you go. Because he's leaning himself so far over first. The hip isn't even really getting abducted until the end range of the exercise because he's so far leaning that he has to kind of take himself out of the adduction first to then complete the abduction motion. So is that going to give the glute a stretch that he wants? Yes. But it's I don't know. It's the form that I'm not a fan of. If you have to hang on to the machine like that, like you're just putting yourself at more risk. It's funky postures. We've all seen the gym videos, and not saying that Jeff's doing it, but of the people who do weird forms at the gym. I never really liked the cable exercises like that.
I like them if you're doing them correctly. And I honestly use both of those exercises, even though I might not even rate them the highest of like growing your glutes necessarily. But to me, I like them for a little bit of extra stability. I also don't hold on to anything. I also don't do a very heavy weight either. And I keep that in mind. I'm just trying to really get my hips stronger to be more stable with some of the other activities that I do. Here we go.
Overload, they're not quite as stable, and they're a bit more annoying to set up. I'm thinking B tier. The lateral banded walk is the same basic movement pattern, but the band offers virtually zero tension in the stretch. These are fine enough as a warm-up drill or for helping people engage their glute medius better, but they're just not going to add much meat to your glutes unless you're a beginner. I'm putting them in C tier. Okay, speaking of stretching the glutes, let's talk about lunges. Lunges will hit the entire glute. You'll get the upper glutes because of glute medius activation due to the stabilization demands. You'll get the mid glutes from the hip extension and the lower glute area from the deep stretch as you lunge. You can accentuate that stretch by taking longer strides forward and by leaning slightly forward by about 30 degrees. There are many different ways to do lunges, but I like old school walking lunges the best. I like the idea that you're moving through space. It gives you something to actually work toward rather than just doing reps on the spot. I find that more motivating. And sure, while you can probably get a slightly better stretch with Bulgarian split squats, if you take big steps on lunges, you'll feel a massive glute stretch too. And even though soreness isn't everything, I get more sore from lunges than anything else. I'm a huge fan of walking lunges, and I'm sending them straight to S tier. Smith machine lunges have all the same benefits, but again, I just don't like doing all my reps on the spot when I have the option to move through space. That's more of a personal preference thing, but I'm still putting these in high A tier. If you elevate your front foot on a small box, you'll get a bit more range of motion at the bottom, which is just enough to sneak these into S tier. With curtsy lunges, you step back diagonally behind your other leg. This requires more balance, meaning it'll activate the glute medius more. So another good option for the upper glutes. That said, I think because they're harder to overload, I don't think they're quite as good as a standard lunge. They're definitely an option you can include every now and then, but I'm feeling low B tier.
Well,
it comes down to
let's
function.
cover 3
yeah. Let me see what he says next.
First up, the dead.
Okay, I think we could just talk about lunges in general. I like lunges in general. I think I would say they're like A. A lot of them are probably S. I mean, you're going to do so many things with them. I expected him to say the curtsy lunges were like a B tier because it's just not a bodybuilding type of thing.
No, that's what I meant by comes out function. It's not functional for him. It's not to build like the juicy booty he wants, but at the same time, like it's not. He even said it's not a bad exercise, but for his functionality and for the purpose of the video, it's not gonna grow his glute med like crazy. No, he's not wrong, but it is a great stability exercise. Like if you're a sport player, soccer player, football player, someone who's taking a lot of those like cuts and whatnot, that'll challenge your glute med muscle like crazy. So that'll be a good one.
I think it's good for everybody to keep in mind that this is like best and worst glute exercises for bodybuilders in particular.
Yeah.
not
Yeah, for
for
hypertrophy.
not for every person, for bodybuilders. There are, I mean, honestly, if you never exercise, it's still a good video to learn a lot of stuff and learn a little bit about technique as well. But it really is tailored towards bodybuilding. It isn't a bad.
I mean, Jeff isn't saying anything wrong at all. For a bodybuilder standpoint, he's hitting all of these on point. It's just for like a, you know, everyday lifter, athlete, functionality type purposes. You know, he's kind of like laying down some other exercises. They're still very good in the gym.
Yeah, I would say we have like maybe minor disagreements, and I don't even know if I would say they're disagreements. It's more just like we would do things a little bit differently for the people we work with, for ourselves maybe, for different athletes. It's just a little different.
All perspective based is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Deadlift. The conventional
I like
deadlift
deadlifts.
is a good glute builder since it trains hip
Love them.
extension, it gives a big stretch on the lower glutes, and it's amazing for progressive overload. The issue is it's
Super
just
functional
such a
exercise.
fatiguing exercise, physically and psychologically. This is why it's said to have a low stimulus to fatigue ratio. You get a lot of stimulus, but you also get a lot of fatigue, especially in muscles other than the glutes, like the spinal erectors. As a strength builder, it's elite, but as a glute hypertrophy exercise, I have to put it in low B tier. The sumo deadlift is very similar.
Really?
The CMG study found no difference in glute maximus EMG activity between conventional and sumo stances. That said, because of the hip abduction and hip external rotation from the wider stance and the foot flare, the sumo deadlift probably does hit the glute medius harder and might shift some emphasis toward the upper glutes. I'm putting it in high B tier as a glute builder. The Romanian deadlift is the better choice for glute hypertrophy, in my opinion, especially for the lower glutes in that glute hamstring tie-in area. And while it does hit the hamstrings hard as well, it smashes the glute max as a basic compound lift that's very conducive to progressive overload. I'm feeling high A tier, and this is actually my number one exercise for the lower glutes, but it's not my number one exercise of all. Before we get to that, let's knock out 3 final exercises. One that I love, one that I hate, and one that's just okay. I love the 45-degree back extension. A lot of people think of it as just a low back exercise, but since you're
gotta be
extending
careful
your
with
hips,
this one.
your entire glutes will be very
especially
active
with this
in both
technique.
the lengthened position at the bottom and the shortened position at the
This
top.
man
Pause it for a
You can overload
second.
these by adding reps, but
Wait,
you
sorry.
can still work up to some.
Yeah.
So with that exercise, the only reason I'm saying you have to be careful of it, one, you can kind of see it on Jeff's. He's got it set up just to the literally just try to put one hair off, and you're doing a lot more lumbar bend than you are the actual hip doing the extension. So it's a glute ham type of exercise. So you want to do glutes and hamstrings with this. If that was just a tad too long, he's going to be overstretching his lumbar spine. If it's a tad too short, he's going to be putting a lot of tension on his hamstring. So he's got it set up almost perfect, but for gym equipment that's designed for, to the average person, it's not going to fit everybody perfect. That's perfect for him. I don't like the arch going on his back.
That's what I was getting at. This position I don't think looks very good. Like he has such a big bend in his back that
kyphosis, it's that the arch.
Yeah. That you're gonna a lot of times have more likelihood to hurt yourself if you're not if you haven't done this before. So, it's okay to have a bend in your back. Just because you're bending your back doesn't mean you get hurt right away. But if you're trying to learn how to do this exercise correctly and isolate your glutes, you want to focus on keeping the back straight. So you're not really using all those muscles the whole time in your back. It's more isolated to the glutes.
Yes.
But I like this exercise. I have one in my house.
Your upper back on these,
It's very
you should
good.
be able to connect with your glutes much better.
like,
I'm honestly feeling S tier for these.
What's that,
easy
sir?
to mess up.
Yeah,
No, so I was saying
are
it's a great exercise, but
They're
easy to
great
mess
for
up.
beginners without much glute strength, but eventually you'll be limited by how much weight you can hold comfortably. They just start to feel awkward once you get some real weight on there. I'm thinking
Good for making babies.
I'm not a big fan of kettlebell swings. You can definitely get a good cardio workout with these, and
Great
I think
for
they do have
making
some
babies.
utility for building explosive power, but for glute hypertrophy, you're just not getting enough tension. Low D tier. Okay, and if I had to pick
Yeah, so good. I agree with him. Those are very good for power. Those are good for explosive athletes like basketball, football, things like that. Maybe not good for a bodybuilder.
The kettlebell swing to me was never a glute exercise, as it was more of a core and stability exercise. I never thought
Interesting.
I'm doing this to work out my glutes. The weight swing and travel to me, it's like, all right, I have to stabilize my core with that weight starting to travel. It's going to make me have to stabilize my core in different areas. Does it work the glute? Yeah, just squatting down, but I never looked at it as a very large glute exercise.
That's a good point. Let's keep going.
Pick just one exercise from S tier to raise it up to S tier plus as the best of the best, I think I'd have to go with the walking lunge. I realize that's a hot take, but these are all great glute builders, and if I had to personally just pick one, I think it would be the walking lunge. And I'll go with the donkey kick or the fire hydrant as the worst of the worst, not because they can't have their place as warm-up drills, but it's just really hard to reach high glute tension for muscle growth. I'm actually really trying to bring up my own glutes this year, so I'm doing a ton of hip thrusts, hip abductions, and walking lunges, but it's not enough to just dial your training in. Your diet is also crucial. You need to ensure that you're eating the right number of calories and protein.
I think we'll end the video there. Let's get a nice picture of Jeff's butt here.
Pull up the tiers. Go to the tiers.
Oh, the tiers.
10 seconds
better.
forward.
That's better.
Yeah. Pull up.
There we go. Oh wait, where's the negatives? Oh, we know. We can see from here.
Yeah, it's the bottom two. From his standpoint, no, it's completely, it makes sense that those ones would be the ones that he'd pop up to the S plus. I am a little surprised that he put the walking lunges, but he's not wrong. It's very functional. And the donkey kicks and fire hydrants, I don't know. I would have put the kettlebell swing as the F minus.
Really?
Yeah.
I disagree. I do think, honestly, I just love exercises. Like, I have trouble saying any exercise is an F minus or even an F.
I mean, for the aspect of the glute for me, like I get it. You have to get the momentum to swing it up. But eventually I feel like momentum just kind of takes over for that one where you're kind of just like on a swing with the kettlebell or it's just like, going up and down. Like the glutes at a certain points isn't going to do as much as you liked.
I think that when you do the eccentric portion of a kettlebell swing, you actually have to have pretty strong glutes to do it. Like that's a lot.
I think I have to go and try that in the gym and see if before I knock it, I need to go and try it.
Mm-hmm. Sure, for next time you go to the gym.
There we go.
But I actually like it. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that I do kettlebell swings. I'm like, oh man, my glutes are firing. But maybe I just like the exercise. Honestly, I just like the exercise.
Not a bad exercise. I'm just saying, like I agree with him for specifically targeting the glutes. No, I mean, are you going to get glute activation? Yeah, because you're doing a squat with the kettlebell, of course. But I never look at it as like, okay, I'm working glutes today. We're going to do some kettlebell swings. If I wanted to just add in an exercise that like, all right, I need to superset with something, but I don't want to die. Kettlebell swings, perfect. They serve a purpose. But yeah.
I think the thing for me is like making a tier list of all these exercises is really tough actually, because there's function or there's use for all of them for different people in different ways.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think you almost have to do what Jeff did here and make it bodybuilding or muscle growth based, because if you just try to make it general, like generally you can't really say, like there's reasons that a lunge might not be as good for someone as like a normal squat. Like there could be there's a lot of other factors that might make one exercise better than another. Like even the D here, the fire hydrants, for someone who just hurt their back and they're trying to learn how to move their pelvis and their lower back better, that's actually a very good exercise.
Exactly. Which it comes down to perspective, which is why I was going to even say like a lot of this comes down to just it's subjective. Some people feel more of a glute activation with certain exercises. Does that have to do with body composition to a certain point? Yes. Does it have to do with posture or size? Like some people have wider pelvises, smaller pelvises, longer femurs. Like it all depends. Like I know a guy who was only able to squat unless his toes were rotated out. I can squat with my toes straight, and it's just because of positioning of hips and everything too. So it's all as objective as we can get. There's still a subjective portion to all of it.
Mm-hmm. I think to wrap all of this up, it's a very good video, very informative. You're definitely going to learn a lot if you like it. I think Jeff did a very good job. I do think he does his research. He's not just doing all this stuff just for funsies off the top of his head either. And just remember, like if you're training for something, that it might be a little bit different. There might be some exercises that work well for you that might not be the best for a bodybuilder.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. It's all based on what you're looking for, what you need. I thought Jeff did a great video. I love that he included the research because a lot of people would just go on here and just rank their favorite exercises because of how they feel with them. But he whipped out the research and yeah, and then I mean, of course, like I said, he's gonna have his own opinion on some of this stuff just like we do. But I thought it was a fantastic, very informative video.
Yeah, if anyone else sees a glute video, please let us know. We will react to it. We'll give you our 2 cents. We love the glutes, obviously. Dr. Tom, anything else to say for today?
No, well, the last thing I'll lead off with is if you're going to go and attempt any of these exercises, just focus on form, start light, and build it up from there. If you're inexperienced, there's definitely some new exercises that you can go and grab from here. If you are experienced, there's ways to progress the ones that we love.
Alrighty, babies. We'll call it a night there.
Thank you.